Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Marcia Wessel, and on behalf of IntelliSoft Group, I'd like to welcome you to the inaugural Payer Enrollment Institute webinar, Provider Enrollment Education Launch. The program will be presented by Donna Gestencourt and Dina Solis and is brought to you in collaboration with TeamBed Global and sponsored by the Massachusetts Association of Medical Staff Services. For those of you who may not know IntelliSoft Group, we are a leading provider of credentialing, provider enrollment, and contract management software. We also have an NCQA certified CBO division that can help with either temporary or full-time assistance for a number of services, including PSV and enrollment. A few housekeeping items before we begin. The dialog box located on the right-hand side of your screen is very helpful for a number of reasons. If you find it difficult to hear the presenter, you may want to call in on the phone number listed in the audio section because sometimes computer speakers aren't ideal for sound. Also, there will be a live Q&A at the end of the webinar. Because we have so many attendees today, we request that you submit your questions in the question section of the dialog box. And finally, the PowerPoint, Certificate of Participation, and NAM CEU for today's program are available now for download in the handout section. Now it is with great pleasure that I introduce our friend and today's first speaker, Donna Gestencourt. With over 42 years experience in the medical staff services industry, many of you may know Donna or have worked with her personally. And with that, I'll turn things over to Donna.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marcia. One technical question before we jump into the program, Marcia. On my screen, there's a box that says attendee still on hold. Shall I disregard that because you started the program?
Oh, yes, the program has started and we are recording.
Okay, wonderful. Well, again, thank you, Marcia. And hello to our 600 plus listeners for participating in the kickoff to our first payer enrollment session and series of 2018 under our exclusively branded service, Payer Enrollment Institute. This first of its kind initiative will bring to you educational programs and resources like today's session, PE Class 101, the education launch. Now this session and this entire series is targeted especially to the payer enrollment specialists, practice managers, MSPs, and any other healthcare professional who wants to better understand payer enrollment theory, and those who have a desire to perform their work with even greater competence. My name is Donna Gestencourt. Hi, everyone, and I'm proud to share this Payer Enrollment Institute trailblazing experience with my co-presenter, Dina Solis. Dina, with your 17 years experience working as a payer enrollment administrator, please let your naturally sunny side reach out to our listeners with a friendly greeting.
Okay, thank you, Donna. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I'm really excited to share all of the information that Donna and I have put together, and I look forward to enjoying this presentation.
Wonderful. All right. Now, many of you may have already made the connection that Dina and I have worked together on all things payer enrollment for a solid 7 years. I'm so very proud to report that we, along with IntelliSoft, were the first organizations and professionals to share our industry knowledge and expertise in a webcast format regarding this industry demand topic. In addition, our expertise is being sought by others who have participated in our programs previously, and our expertise has been validated by NAMS, as Dina and I were the first in the industry to be invited by NAMS to present at their national conference on this very specific subject of payer enrollment. In fact, we recently were notified that our proposed payer enrollment session for this year's conference has been approved. So this will be our 5th straight year to have the opportunity to broadcast the important role that you play in healthcare and the importance of payer enrollment at our industry's largest educational event. Now, Marcia has already identified the stakeholders involved in this production, so the slide that you see before you simply serves as a friendly reminder that it takes a strong collaboration of people with passion to produce a successful educational tour, and we realize we couldn't do it without you. Our success is because of you. Now, today's introductory session will serve as a great refresher for those experienced specialists and a wonderful opportunity to learn from the beginning about the specialty of payer enrollment. So what are Dina and I going to target today as part of your lesson? Well, we're going to start off by describing for you what payer enrollment is and isn't, and provide a visual competency graphic that shows you exactly the industry skills needed in today's healthcare market. We'll also provide words, acronyms, and terms that are used in payer enrollment conversations every day, as well as in your processes and practices. And we're going to again provide an industry-first visual graphic about the process steps in payer enrollment. And then we'll end this hour-long session by describing for you some best practice techniques. So we have a lot to cover, but remember, this is our first session in a series. So stay tuned towards the end of the program, and we'll let you know what the next session coming up will be and the date. So let's get started and prepare ourselves, really, our minds to stretch, because great things never come by staying in our comfort zones. And don't we know that? Healthcare is constantly changing. Now, what I thought would be a great way to start my portion of this program, it was really to describe for you questions that I get from my colleagues when I'm out in the field, because they really want to understand payer enrollment better. Some of us have experience in payer enrollment, some of us hear about it, and some of us has a little dabbling or maybe given that additional responsibilities. But what I'm going to show you in the next slide are real questions that I get from colleagues in the field. So they'll go, Donna, I hear a lot about payer enrollment, but is this something that I should be concerned with? Is this something that I need to know about? Is this part of my career future? Or I'll hear from colleagues and they'll say, gosh, Donna, you know, I just don't feel happy in my job. I feel like I'm burnt out. Is there something else that I can be pursuing within the medical staff services industry that will kind of re-motivate me, make me feel alive and challenged again? And then I'll get statements like, or questions, what should I do if I'm seeking a new challenge? I feel like I've mastered everything that I needed to know working in a physician's office and maybe even in a medical staff services department, but I just feel like there's something else that's calling me. Do you have any suggestions for me, Donna? Or I'll hear, gosh, I'm hearing all about this thing called payer enrollment, even more now than I used to. Tell me what's involved in payer enrollment, and do I have the skills to really change my area of specialty into the payer enrollment world? So with those questions, it's important to frame everything for us, because we want to take you on this journey of payer enrollment management. So first, embrace the concept that payer enrollment is indeed part of the medical staff services industry. It's part of managed care, but it's a very distinct function relating to medical staff services. And that's why there has been such a need, because people were talking about it more in global terms and never drilling down to really describe what payer enrollment means. We know that every time we learn something new, we hear something new, we have to position ourselves on whether or not this is something that really is speaking to them. And sometimes when we're hearing something new, it makes us feel uncomfortable. But what Dina and I want to really encourage you about payer enrollment is please embrace the change. At least open your mind up with the possibility of learning something new that can augment your current skills. If you're struggling on what to do about payer enrollment or what your steps are, there are mentors all around you, and just the mere example of our 600 plus attendees in this program, that number is continuing to grow and grow. And when we're trying to learn something new, it again makes us feel a little uncomfortable that, oh my gosh, who am I going to ask? But sometimes it's just making that call that first time to start breaking down the walls. Also understanding that pursuing a payer enrollment path is part of an update to your career plan. And whatever you're going to do, we have to commit to take action, and whatever that looks like, attending a webinar like this, reading a book, doing research, reaching out to a colleague, really taking action will begin to fill those knowledge gaps in for you. And when we're talking about knowledge gaps, again, framing payer enrollment properly, it all starts with competence. Everything within healthcare is being measured. And according to Webster's Dictionary, competence is the quality of being able to functionally have knowledge and judgment and skill to carry out a particular duty. That is how physicians are being measured on the privileges that they're performing, what their competence is in performing them. The same holds true with MSPs. So then we carry that measurement of competence. Well, Donna, what are we going to be measuring? How am I going to measure myself? How do my supervisors measure my level of competence? And this formula very clearly and succinctly describes the knowledge that one acquires, the skills that we practice every day, and our ability to use our knowledge and our skills to perform the task that we've been asked to perform. And when we're looking at our competence in a total package, we have those skills that we perform efficiently, how well we're able to get along with others will make us, when those two are balanced, it makes our options of career choices that much more powerful. And the very last competence slide that Dina and I want to show you is the area which describes the core competency within that skills track. And if you see on your screen the bolded enrollment management function, all of the other things are based upon surveys that I do annually, and what I see in the field are things that MSPs and healthcare professionals working in medical staff services need to have some knowledge and preferably some working practice skills in performing. So that tells you when this competency table was first created 12 years ago, this enrollment was not one of those measurements. Just over the last 5 years, because of the feedback that I got from healthcare administrators as well as our colleagues, it's now one of the stable foundational pieces of competence for MSPs. So framing that and moving now into payer enrollment. Gosh, Donna, what is payer enrollment called? I hear it called so many different things, and I'm not sure if we're all talking the same thing. Well, I'm going to display for you what Dina and I, again, here in the field on how payer enrollment is referred to. You may hear or see it spelled as payer with an ER or payer with an OR. I've learned just in my evolution of understanding payer enrollment, there is no right or wrong. Whatever your organization whatever your organization's culture is, will dictate how you're going to spell that. I also hear it being referred to as provider enrollment, or just simply enrollment, or contracting, or credentialing. And what Dina and I really want to underscore, and we've said this at other programs, but it warrants us repeating. Payer enrollment is not credentialing. Now, we don't have an influence how your job title reads or what your organization's culture is if they're referring to it as credentialing, but in the practice of the function, payer enrollment is not credentialing. Well, if it's not credentialing, then Donna, tell me what it is. What distinguishes the difference between these two? Well, credentialing, for many of us who are MSPs and expert credentialers, we understand that credentialing is the process of verifying all of the collection of documents from its original source whenever possible regarding a practitioner's education, training, and current competence and their ability to perform privileges that they've requested. Where conversely, enrollment is the process of applying to health insurance plans for inclusion into their network so they can get paid for their services. So that's very simply the difference between the two. And in order for us, as we move forward in this training program, we want to be using the terms properly. And we thought by distinguishing those, we can be tracking much more quickly during our programs to make sure we're using the proper terminologies and language. And with that, I'm now going to toss the program over to Dina because she's going to talk specifically about terminologies, acronyms, and definitions that are commonly used within the payer enrollment specialty. Dina?
Thank you, Donna. Okay, so when Donna and I were coming up with this program, we decided that before we get into the processes and the process model that we've developed, we thought it would be important to cover some basic terminology that may seem very elementary to some of you, but if you're just beginning your payer enrollment career, or if you're just learning about it or want to learn about it, these are some basic language terms that you will run into just in your dealing with payer enrollment. So you may run into the term rendering provider, and that would be referring to your practitioner, your institution, a home health or DME. That would be the provider that's rendering services to the patient, and it could be individual, or it could be organizational or individual. Payer health plan refers to the insurance company. PAR, non-PAR, that's a term that is referred to the provider's network status. Participating or non-participating is what that refers to. It can also, network status can be referred to as out of network or in network, which can be abbreviated by the acronym that you see here. You'll hear the term provider number or even legacy number. Provider number just refers to the number that a provider would use to bill an insurance company with. And it's also been, they've also been known as legacy numbers. So if you ever see that on an application or in your dealing with health plans, that's what that refers to. You also have the individual, group, or billing provider. So that term refers to whichever either the individual or the group would be billing the health plan. So you may have an individual who may need enrollment with a health plan, but if the group is the organization that will be, the entity that will be billing the provider, that's what that term refers to. You also may hear reassignment of benefits, and that ties in with the previous term, which refers to if an individual is enrolled with a health plan who is working under a group which bills the health plan, that individual would need to reassign their benefits to the group so that the group will be able to bill and receive reimbursement on behalf of that individual. Another term you may hear would be tax identification number, EIN or TIN, which all refers to the employer identification number or tax ID number. Those are pretty much one and the same. And then you also may run into hard copy or wet ink signatures, and that refers to how the health plan would prefer to have their signatures by providers if you're working with paper applications. There's also, I should have put in here, electronic signature. That could also be a term that you would run into. And if we could move to the next slide. Okay, CMS. This refers to Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So that is the governing body that oversees Medicare and Medicaid insurance programs. Medicare refers to the federal insurance program. Medicare Part A typically refers to hospital or inpatient care. And Medicare Part B refers to patient visits, office visits, preventative care. Medicaid and Medi-Cal are synonymous in that they're the state-run insurance program. Medi-Cal is just the name that California uses for their state Medicaid program. And then we have managed Medicare and Medicaid plans. You may see these in dealing with payer enrollment. And what they refer to is there are plans that are actual Medicare and Medicaid plans, but they're administered by private payers. So those could also be referred to as an MCO, like a Medicare Advantage plan. We can certainly get into a lot more, but this is just very high level as to how Medicare and Medicaid is administered. There are third-party commercial private payers. Those are referred to like Aetna, United Healthcare, Cigna, Humana. Those would be examples of private commercial or third-party payers. And then you have plans within those payers that members can sign up with, which could be referred to as HMOs, PPOs, EPOs, and MCOs. I'm sure we could go into a very lengthy presentation just delineating the differences between those, but just to be aware of those might be types of plans that you'll be needing to enroll your providers with in these third-party payers. Covered lives refers to, with third-party payers and commercial and private payers, sometimes your organization may be interested in how many covered lives a payer has, which means their health plan members. So this would be important, might be important to your organization, because the more covered lives that a health plan has, the more reach it has and the more market a provider can gain by being able to serve more members. FFS means fee for service, and that's basically just a term that's used for the type of services that a health plan member would make. So like a doctor visit, or it basically refers to a reimbursement that a provider would get based on the service that the provider provides the patient.
Hey, Dina, this is Donna, and I'd like to make an observation. As I'm listening to the different terms and acronyms that you're using, a story kind of struck me. What I hear often from people who are new into the medical staff services world, or individuals who are coming from outside of healthcare, they are blown away by the number of acronyms that are used in healthcare. So the reason I say that is please don't feel intimidated by these terms. It's merely being used as an introduction. So, oh gosh, you know, I heard about that. I heard Dina use that reference in the webinar. It doesn't mean you have to know all of these things right now. This is the process really in the evolution of helping everybody who has an interest in payer enrollment be introduced to that type of terminology. So it really, you know, knowledge is power, and it was really important that I just made that observation.
Exactly. Well, it can be in the beginning, and this is an introductory webinar, it can be very intimidating going into payer enrollment and not knowing really what the lingo or the language that, you know, what's out there that you need to be aware of. So with that, I'd like to cover, and this is very high level. I won't go into exactly every inner working of Medicare and regarding payer enrollment, but as a high level, you will, during the course of your enrollment processes, will encounter a MAC, and a MAC is a Medicare Administrative Contractor. And basically what a MAC does is it is a geographic area that is awarded geographic area that processes Medicare claims for fee-for-service beneficiaries. So it processes the MAC, which is they're assigned to geographic areas in the United States, and basically all of your enrollments and claims go through the MAC. So when you're enrolling, and they're very specific to the type of provider and the geographic area. So when you're enrolling your providers, just a key area to note is that you will need to go through not Medicare when we're referring to who do I submit the enrollment to. Is there one address? Is there one, who do I go through for questions about what's required for my enrollment of my provider? Your organization will probably all have this all mapped out for you, but if not, you will need to go to your Medicare, and this can be done with a simple Google search. You can type in, who is my MAC, Medicare Administrative Contractor for the state of such and such. And there's a website that will show you and go through I believe it's on cms.gov, that will show you exactly what Medicare contractor you will go through for your enrollments. But as a high level example of MACs would be like Noridian Administrative Services, Cigna Government Services, National Government Services, and the National Supplier Clearinghouse. So those are acronyms, and those are just examples of Medicare administrative contractors that you will probably be dealing with throughout the enrollment process. So currently there are 15 MAC jurisdictions. A jurisdiction is basically just refers to that geographic area that's specific to the provider. So there are certain jurisdictions within the MAC that are specific just to those practitioners and those types. So that would be another area that you would need to pay attention to. Is who I'm calling for questions or submitting your enrollment, would that be the correct area for my specific provider type? So now we'll just go over some basic terminology and acronyms that you will see on your enrollment applications. So these would be areas like the LBN, you might hear referred to as legal business name. You'll have areas on your applications that refer to billing, payment, and service address. These are really important areas on the applications to pay attention to, because this delineates where your services are being provided, where your payments are going, and where your billing is handled out of. And for many providers, those addresses are different and can really affect the communications that you receive from your payers. So just being aware of that there are definitely differences between those addresses. And when you're dealing with payers, my piece of advice is to make sure that you inquire exactly what each of those mean to that health plan, because it could mean billing and payment could mean something different to those providers. To those payers. The effective date is something that you might see on an application, and that just basically means if you're able to, what effective date would you choose? Sometimes payers will allow a retroactive effective date that will allow you to go back to a certain period of time. Some payers will allow that time to be the effective date on a license. So that might be a question that you would ask during your inquiry process of the payer. Date of service refers to, sometimes you'll see that on an application, which would be your first date of service that you may have seen a patient, that the provider treat a patient, or provide services to a patient. Billing codes would be something that you might encounter in the process of your enrollment process, or the enrollment process, and what that means are your procedure codes, your HCPCS codes. CPT codes refers to the procedures that are provided to the patient. And the HCPCS codes usually are equipment provided. It could be medications, it could be whatever services that the patient has received. That may be an area that you would see on an application or your enrollment process, because payers might initially want to know what exact services, what is it that you'll be billing to that payer. Fee schedule kind of goes along with billing codes. Sometimes your organization might want to know the rates before they enroll with a payer. So you might be asked to find out what can you get a copy of their fee schedule. So fee schedule and reimbursement rates would definitely, could be something that a term that you would be exposed to. And those can usually be found on the payer's websites, or you may have to actually ask a representative. Some payers won't give out fee schedules up front. They will only give it out once you're contracted. Credentialing and re-credentialing, that basically is very similar to initial enrollment and re-enrollment and revalidation. Those are terms that you might hear. Credentialing and re-credentialing may be that once you're credentialed with a payer, after a certain period of time, and that could be every 3 to 5 years, it could be every year for certain payers, that you would have to go through another follow-up credentialing process. And another term that you may come into would be change of ownership or change of information. A change of ownership has been referred to as a CHOW. So you may come across that as an acronym. And then on applications, you'll see an area for your NPI, which is your National Provider Identifier Number, and your taxonomy code, which is basically what taxonomy would your organization be billing under. So it could be a group, it could be a multi-specialty group, it could be durable medical equipment, it could be, there are different taxonomy codes for different services. And those can be found on, you could do a web search for them, but typically on the NPI enumerator website is where you can find taxonomy codes. You'll also hear or see PTAN. There might be an area for provider number or legacy number on your application, which would be provider transaction access number. And those areas would be if you're filling out an application that you already have a provider number, you would enter that number there. Enrollment or application fee. So some providers are subject to extra screenings based on their risk level. Without getting into it too much, there's a matrix available on CMS's website that you can refer to, that some payers will require an application fee to enroll in their Medicare, their Medicaid, or their, it's actually a CMS mandated fee. So usually private payers do not have application fees or enrollment fees. You also see areas on your applications referring to licensure, accreditation, registration, and boards. And those would be areas that you would enter that information for providers. COI refers to the coverage of insurance certificate, which is basically proof of malpractice or liability insurance, whatever the payer is requiring. You'll see areas on that certificate that refer to certificate holder or additional insured. I put this on here because sometimes payers will ask that they be listed on the provider's insurance certificate as an additional insured or certificate holder. So I wanted to just include this as a term that you may hear. And then also on applications, these may be separate areas, but EFT, ERA, and EDI are all areas that payers are interested in knowing how are you going to want to be paid. Most payers require electronic funds transfer, which would be basically like an ACH, which would refer to providing information regarding the provider's banking information, account number, routing number, that kind of information. Electronic remittance advice refers to payers wanting to know how do you want your remits to be sent to you. Most are electronic, but sometimes there are paper. Providers might want paper remittance, but most are electronic. EDI refers to basically electronic data interchange, which is electronic billing. And then another area of your applications are attestations and disclosure statements. And those refer to just releasing information about the provider, such as history of malpractice suit, history of any type of insurance claim, any sanctions against the provider, just disclosing anything that could be adversely reported about the provider that you need to disclose up front. And then here we've just listed in no particular order some helpful websites. I use these frequently when dealing with my clients. So NPES or NEPS, however you want to refer to it, is basically the area where you can apply for an NPI number or maintain information on an existing NPI number. CMS.gov is very helpful because I use it for forms if I need to refer for application fees, any type of policies or regulations that I might need clarification on. Pay.gov is where CMS, the site that CMS uses to pay for an application fee. It's basically a web portal that you can go on and pay your provider's application fee if that's applicable. CAQH is very helpful because a lot of payers will actually use CAQH to help enroll your providers. So that's a very helpful and useful website as well. PACOS is the Medicare Provider Enrollment Portal. So if you're not wanting to use paper, PACOS is the way to go. And Medicaid.gov is information on state Medicaids and managed Medicaids. That's a very helpful. The USPS website, I put that up there because I frequently use it. I deal with clients across the United States, and a lot of applications need to know their ZIP+4 codes in their county, and they may be in an area that I'm not aware of. So it's an easy way I can look up the service area or the provider's information. And then AIS Health, that's a website that I've used to find a resource that is helpful to me on health plans. So they have a tool that you can download or purchase that has information on private payers. And then the MACs, obviously, we've gone over those: Noridian, CGS, NGS, and Palmetto GBA, the NSC.
All right, so what Dina has just done is laid the foundation that will provide triggers for us when we're working in the payer enrollment environment. But so the next logical question coming to Dina and I, okay, thank you for sharing that information. That will help me. But can you give me an overview of what the key steps in payer enrollment are? And that's what this next series of slides are going to provide for you: the who, what, when, and how. So let's first talk about the what. There's three key components of the types of enrollment, of types of enrollment. You're going to be managing federal and state enrollment. You're going to be looking at private and commercial health plans, and then workers' compensation. So the little icons and pictures, I should say, really not icons, but the pictures that are to the right of each of those bulleted areas is just a reference, okay? Federal and state, Medicare and Medicaid, private and commercial, the Blue Cross Blue Shield, Cigna, Aetna's as examples, and then workmen's compensation. So now that we understand the three core areas of health plans that one would be enrolled into in order to get paid, then we want to look at, well, who do we enroll? And it really depends on what your organization or your provider group is looking for. Who is going to be the billing? Who's going to be doing the billing? Who's it going to be going through? Is it going to be going through an individual's NPI number or the group's tax ID number? And these are questions that you have to ask or get clarification. If you're not sure currently what your organization, you're just kind of going through the process as you were described, pause and try to ask those questions so you can connect the dots. And then you want to make sure that if you do enroll as a group, every individual who's going to be part of that group doing the billing, getting paid, is also enrolled, and that because the reimbursement benefits are going to be assigned to that specific group. And then lastly, the who is, you need to identify your organization's internal enrollment process before starting. Just as I said, hit the pause button and really have a good understanding about the who within your organization that needs to be enrolled into a health plan. Did I miss any points on that particular slide, Dina? Dina, are you there? Oh, we may have lost her. Well, while she calls back in, let's go ahead now and look at the who, an additional the who. What are these types of practitioners? We have type 1 practitioners that work off of an MPI number. The MDs, the psychologists, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, physical therapists, and the audiologists as examples. And then we have the type 2 NPI, which are the organizational providers, just as listed there on your screen. You know, the durable medical equipment, that's the DME, home medical equipment suppliers, the pharmacies, the ambulance service, the hospital. So each of these groups also would need to apply or enroll into a health plan if they're providing services and want to get reimbursed. So then let's look at the when, because that's probably the question Dina and I get most frequently when we're in the field and working with clients. Well, how long does it take for us to enroll into the various health plans? And really, it depends. And that's always, too, one of the most frustrating parts. from the practitioner standpoint, as well as the professional doing the enrolling, because the processing times do vary from payer to payer. And what time frame we have identified on this slide is just our experience. You may have, an average of that, but that's the shortest amount of time and the longest amount of time that we have experienced. And then if you're not sure, you've checked the health plan's website, and you're still not sure, then the next best step is to actually call the health plan and ask them what their average processing time of that enrollment application would be. Dina, I think I heard you join back in. Are you there?
I am. I'm sorry. I had a little problem with my audio dropping.
No worries. Of the steps that I've covered, the what, the who, the when, any points that I missed that you wanted to touch base?
Oh, well, the enrollment process time is very fluid. That's really just a general guide. I've actually had some enrollments take longer than 180 days. So it really does vary by payer, and I'm sure that everybody who's on this call who's worked with health plans before can attest that that's really kind of a moving target. So it's not just a matter of asking. Sometimes it can be a matter, getting your enrollment process can be a matter of bugging the payer, literally. So just having persistence, and if you're having trouble getting the enrollment processed, really just staying on the payer and keeping in communication with the payer would be a good helpful hint.
And again, the thing that I hear frequently from the field is, gosh, I feel like my process is very well fine-tuned, but it seems like the payer side, that they're very inconsistent in how they're acting on these. So that's where the gray area comes into place, and that's where the frustration begins to wave. And they keep, and I think it's important too, as professionals, we continue to want to look at our process to see how we can fine tune that and take out as much variability in our process as possible. When you're working with others, you have to collaborate, but we all can improve our process in some way. So we've covered the when and the who, but let's look at the how. And this is really where Dina and I have such strengths, because we can take very complex steps, very complex theories and practices, and we keep boiling them down and boiling them down. So what you're going to see on the next several slides, we're not going to go into detail. It's primarily as an introduction, so you can look at this and then understand that the process that you go through can be sequentially placed in this way. So the first slide we're looking at is again, how. What are the three categories of payers? And again, we have the federal, the state, and then the private and commercial payers. Then we're looking at defining, well, okay, what is the process for enrollment? And Dina and I, again, based upon our processes, delineated it in two steps. We have a pre-enrollment process and then a post-enrollment process. And as we go further into this series, not this session, we're going to break that down even more. But for the purpose of this session, let's look at the steps involved in the pre-enrollment. We have to determine which plans your organization or your provider, your practitioner, are going to participate in, contact that payer to ask questions, collect all of the information from the provider, and then we want to obtain and complete that application. But we're not done with those 4 steps, right? In the pre-enrollment process, we also have 4 more steps. We're going to prepare that letter of interest. We're going to submit that packet to the payer, to the payer, that enrollment application to the payer with all of the appropriate documentation. And we're going to continue to follow up until the determination is made. And that was what Dina was referencing just in our previous slides. And then what do we do if the network denies the application, the enrollment application that was submitted? There's all different kinds of strategies to use with that. But moving on to our steps, we're looking at post-enrollment. And we've defined post-enrollment into 4 steps: obtaining proof of that enrollment from that payer, implement that payment with the billing department, load that contract into the database, and then always provide ongoing maintenance to make sure that enrollment does not lapse. So again, that was a quick down and dirty of the visual graphic steps of payer enrollment, which we will just define in subsequent sessions. But now I'm going to ask Dina to walk us through what do those final steps really look like? Dina?
Thanks, Donna. Okay, so if your enrollment application is approved, the insurance company the plan will contact you, usually via letter, sometimes via email. The provider's linked to the group if it's an individual provider, and then the provider is activated with an effective date. If the enrollment is denied, the insurance plan will notify the payer again via letter or an email, and then they typically will ask the provider to reapply. Oh, we'll keep your information on file, reapply in another 6 months, or whatever the month is. So then you're left thinking, well, that doesn't help me if we're not enrolled. I have to get my provider enrolled. What other steps could I possibly, that can't possibly be it. What else can I do? So then the next slide, I have some suggestions of what I've done. When I first started working with clients, I really didn't understand, and I had to find out for myself, well, what's next? What can you do? Well, you can ask I've asked payers for secondary level appeal. That's kind of a fancy lingo for, can you look at our application again? Who can I talk to? You can ask for a manager. You can ask to ask if your information could be presented to the actual contractor or the person who makes the decisions regarding the network. Sometimes it can be a matter of the payer not really understanding exactly what it is the provider does, so they might ask you to submit additional information, or you can simply ask, can I submit additional information? You're in the driver's seat, so you can, what I've done is if I've gotten a denial from a payer, I've said, whoa, hang on. Let me make sure that you understand exactly what it is that my provider does before slamming the door in our face, basically. Sometimes it's a matter of just getting to educate the payer on what exactly it is that the provider does. And so with that, you can submit, if there's something that your provider does that's different, maybe they are willing to offer discounted rates, maybe they serve a rural area of your state or your county, or a population that is underserved, you can indicate that to the payer, and that might raise their eyebrows and let them see that there's something different that your provider might offer. And then lastly, if all else fails, you can certainly ask for, if that payer, if they would be willing to accept a single patient letter of agreement. And basically that just asks for payment for that specific patient. And sometimes that can help get you in because they can see how the provider takes care of their plan members. So before I get into some quick tips, these are things that can delay enrollment: expired licensures, errors and omissions on the application, using the wrong forms or the wrong versions of forms if you're doing paper applications, not including all of the documentation that's required. Maybe if it's a paper application, sometimes dates and signatures can be missing. Also, lack of response to payers for requests for additional information. Many times payers will come back and ask hey, I've got your application, but it was missing this, or we need a little bit more information. Can you get this? Really being on top of staying in communication with that payer to make sure that you get that information. And then just not being prepared or organized can delay enrollment as well. So now that we've looked at that, what kind of things can you do to help expedite or just make your process go a little bit smoother? What I always do, even if I've worked with a provider or with a payer before, I'll contact that rep or that plan and just ask a few questions, because things could change from one month or 1 week to another. Their requirements may change. So I usually ask what their process is, if there's any special requirements or forms that need to be completed for a specific provider type. I always ask their processing time frame, so that way I can keep in communication with my providers and let them know how long this process is going to take. And then I always ask what their preferred submission method is, because even if it's on their website, they may allow a fax signature or a copy of a signature and not an original signature. You may be able to go through their website to actually upload some documents. And then I usually find out who my key contacts are. And then when dealing with payer relations, I always try to get their name. I usually try to spark up a little conversation, find out a little bit more about them. Not that you can do this with everybody, but if there are certain people that you notice that you're dealing with on a regular basis, with specific payers, I usually try to just make a personal connection with them. I make sure that I keep in contact with them to let them know if there's a delay in information with my providers and getting them additional information. I always thank them, and then I sometimes will connect with them on LinkedIn, which is nice. It makes a face to, puts the face with the name. And then lastly, what you can do is to automate. So credentialing software, as Marcia explained in the beginning of our presentation, software can help expedite by tracking, auto-populating your applications, and some software will even submit the application for you. If you don't have access to software, there are auto-fillable applications on payers' websites. If your organization if you must use paper, your organization could use Adobe Acrobat Pro so that there's no handwriting on applications. And then just taking the time to accurately enter your data, the provider data on applications, because sometimes errors can happen when we're in a hurry, and then always audit your work.
All right, so this introductory session really describes all of the moving parts, all of the many, many steps that payer enrollment specialists do in order to perform their work. What we, Dina and I, have attempted to do is boil it down. If you're looking at the whole management of enrollment, there's lots of moving parts behind these 5 bullets, but think of it this way, again, boiling it down to simple steps. Know your federal requirements, know what the health plan requirements are, understand the resources that you're going to need, the documents from the providers, your contacts with the health plan, the applications, any software. So identify all of the resources that you're going to need in order to successfully supply a completed enrollment application. Use technology in your processes as often and as much as you possibly can. And then really the goal is to make sure that our providers, practitioners, and organizations really are satisfied with the timeliness of how we're supplying not only our timeliness, but also the accuracy, supplying those enrollment applications to the health plans. And really the bottom line reality is it's show me the money. The faster we as professionals can get practitioners and providers enrolled, the more quickly they're going to get compensated for their services. So Dina and I would like to close the formal portion of this program with this power thought. Perhaps some of you thought in just putting your toe in the water by attending this program, you're thinking, oh my gosh, there's so many moving parts, I can't do this. But you hung in there with us and you think, I think I can do this. I'm going to find out more information about payer enrollment. And really, the visual that you see on your slide, it's really as simple as gathering information, practicing what you're learning, and Dina and I truly want to help you reach that top step to success. So with that, I'm going to pause. I'm going to ask Marcia to kind of tee up any questions she may have collected, and I'm going to display the session, the session for our next Payer Enrollment Institute program. So,
Perfect.
Marcia?
Thank you, Donna. We do have a few questions. What do you do for proof of enrollment when a plan does not issue a letter and they tell you to look on their web directory to see if a provider is PAR?
Wow, I haven't actually had that happen to me before, but I suppose you could always do a print screen when it comes up, if it's showing that the provider's in the directory. I haven't actually had that happen. That's a good question.
Okay.
I would say if that's something that provider needs, I suppose capturing the print screen could be, or if you can, I would suggest maybe an email. Maybe they don't have a formal letter, but maybe you could email their provider relations and ask for an effective date and maybe save that as a PDF.
Perfect. Thank you, Dina. The next question, we used to have a provider relations rep from each insurance plan that was assigned to our group, and we were able to develop relationships with them. But we've really seen a shift away from individual reps and now are told to contact a larger provider relations department without any specific contact person. Have you seen this shift across the country? And can you offer any advice on how to deal with this inefficient system?
I have seen that happen a lot. There is a big shift because providers and health plans are being forced to do more with less. So my suggestion for that would be to try to find somebody on LinkedIn. That might be kind of a cheesy alternative, people might think, but I've actually I've queried health plans on LinkedIn and found employees and have just connected with them there to try to find somebody to to communicate with.
Perfect. The next question, we've got some coming in. Provider numbers are assigned specifically for the provider and the tax ID they are being credited to. PTAN as specific to Medicare. Oh, this is just additional information. Sorry about that. And then they're asking, please explain more clearly. Are medical groups considered type 1 MPI or type 2? I get this question all the time.
Groups are type 2. They're organizational.
Okay. And the next question, is there any advice on the separate lines of businesses with the payers being PAR and non-PAR?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Is there any advice on the separate lines of businesses with the payers being PAR and non-PAR?
I'm not really sure I understand the question, what they're looking for. I'd be happy to take a look at it and get an email address and address it. I'm just not really sure what the question is asking.
Yeah, we can definitely follow up after the program with this person. Another question, we are located in New Hampshire. A major problem we have is a fair amount of payers don't send confirmation letters or emails when we enroll providers. Do you have any suggestions on how to change this practice?
Wow. I've dealt with providers or with payers in New Hampshire. New Hampshire Medicaid, one of them. All I could say would be to kind of going along the similar lines of the directory and trying to capture a print screen. I mean, like I said, I haven't really encountered that. Usually I'm provided with a confirmation, some sort of confirmation that the enrollment is effective. I would just say if there's a way that you can capture a print screen again, if that's a possibility.
That would be interesting. This is Donna speaking. That would be interesting to determine if that's a certain payer that's not providing these letters. Because, wow, yeah, I haven't heard of that either.
If it's that much of a problem, I'm assuming you could go through a state agency or possibly contacting CMS or Medicaid.gov, or if there's a resource that maybe could take a look at that. If like Donna said, if it's a specific payer that's not willing to budge on that practice, it just seems unusual.
We're all feeling the pinch about doing more with less, that's for sure. But they're mandated to be sending out these letters of information.
Okay, another question is, do you have any advice regarding payer enrollment as it pertains to telemedicine? We have lots of issues when it comes to billing.
I think that could be an entire another topic.
Yes.
My advice for that, just as a general question, is to ask the payer, whichever payer that you're dealing with, what their guidelines are for the codes that you would be billing for, if they're covering, because a lot of payers haven't jumped on board yet with telemedicine. So my advice would be to find some information out ahead of time.
But I know just telemedicine in general, it's evolving very quickly, and how we in the credentialing side are trying to master the nuances with the telemedicine folks. I'm sure that it's trickling down to the payer side as well. So we're kind of in this vortex together, that's for sure.
And then someone has any good contact information for Humana. They never answer the phone or email.
Well, I am not, even if I had a great contact for Humana, I wouldn't be able to share it over a webinar. So maybe I would be willing to, if you have that person's email address, or if that person would want to reach out to me, I could help give some suggestions.
Okay, and then people are asking about if there's going to be a recording or the printouts. The handouts that we have of the PowerPoint, the NAM certificate, and the certificate of participation are all in the handout section of your display box, the dialog box on the right-hand side of your screen. So you can always download those now. If you have difficulty downloading it, please feel free to get in touch with me, Marcia, after the program, and I can send them to you. And a recording of this program will be available tomorrow around noontime. And it'll come from GoToWebinar/Citrix. And I think that's it. There were some other comments. Just one interesting comment is that one person finds that enrolling brand new providers takes longer, about 60 to 120 days, and established providers, there's a shorter window, about 30 to 90 days. So that was just an interesting comment.
Right.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today and spending a little extra time. I know we went over the 2 o'clock mark, but thank you for spending some extra time with us. And thank you, Donna and Dina, for a very informative presentation. It's very exciting to have this series.
Yeah, more to come. So, yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Well, have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.